Keanu Reeves strolled quietly down a sun-baked Pasadena street, his worn leather jacket a stark contrast to the suburban sprawl around him. A skeptical neighbor shot him a dismissive glance, unaware of the legend in their midst. But what happened next, at a 14-year-old girl's humble lemonade stand, would leave the whole community speechless and change one brave life forever. Before we dive into this unforgettable story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. If you're hooked on inspiring tales like this, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got another heartwarming story waiting just for you. The Pasadena sun beat down like a relentless judge, sentencing the day to sweltering stillness. At the edge of a cracked sidewalk, 14-year-old Lily Harper sat behind a rickety lemonade stand, her small frame hunched over a card table that wobbled with every move. A faded blue cloth draped the surface, barely hiding the scars of time, while a pitcher of lemonade, sides slick with condensation, stood beside a teetering stack of plastic cups. A mason jar labeled "Donations" glinted with a few coins, and above it all hung her sign, "Lemonade for Life," scrawled in bold, uneven letters, a red heart and yellow sunburst blooming beneath the words. Lily adjusted her frayed straw hat, her hazel eyes sharp with purpose despite the shadows Chemo had carved into her face. She wasn't here for pocket money or a teenage whim. Lily was fighting for her life, $1 at a time. Diagnosed with leukemia a year ago, she'd watched her world shrink from classrooms and bike rides to hospital rooms and IV drips. The treatments were a lifeline, but they came with a price her family couldn't pay. Not in a system that dangled hope just out of reach for people like them. Her mom, Sarah, had lost her waitressing job when Lily's appointments piled up, and her dad, Mark, worked 2 grueling shifts, gas station clerk and delivery driver, to keep the lights on. Medical bills stacked higher than their dreams, a towering injustice that mocked their every effort. Lily's lemonade stand was her defiance, a bittersweet brew of desperation and determination. She'd set up that Saturday morning with a quiet resolve, her favorite yellow dress hanging loose on her thin frame. Her hair, once a cascade of auburn, was now a short, uneven crop, Chemo's cruel signature. But her spirit, that burned brighter than the sun overhead. She poured a cup, the tart scent cutting through the heavy air, and waited. This wasn't about charity handouts or pity. It was about taking control, about squeezing hope from the sour hand she'd been dealt. Her parents needed help, and she'd be damned if she let them drown alone. The neighborhood barely noticed at first. A jogger huffed by, tossing a distracted wave, but no cash. A car slowed, its driver glancing at her sign before speeding off, as if her struggle was just another roadside curiosity. Lily didn't flinch. She straightened her sign, sipped her own lemonade, cool relief against her parched throat, and kept going. Mrs. Delgado, the widow from 3 houses down, was her first real customer. Her cane tapped a slow rhythm as she approached. "How much, mija?" she asked, voice soft but steady. $1, Lily said, flashing a grin that masked her exhaustion. Mrs. Delgado handed over a crumpled 5. "Keep it, for your fight." Her gaze lingered on Lily's sign, then her hollow cheeks, a silent nod to the battle etched into her young face. A few more trickled by after that. A kid on a skateboard flipped a quarter into the jar, a mom with a stroller bought a cup and slipped an extra buck inside. Mr. Ortiz, the mail carrier, stopped with his usual grin. "Best lemonade in town, Lily," he said, dropping a 10. "Keep it up." She smiled, her chest swelling with a flicker of pride. But the jar held just $27 by noon. Pennies against the thousands they needed. A man in a suit passed, muttering, "Shouldn't have to beg like this," his words a sharp jab at the world's unfairness. Lily brushed it off. She wasn't begging. She was building something, even if no one else saw it yet. Her fight had started a year ago, subtle at first, tiredness that wouldn't lift, bruises sprouting like dark secrets, fevers that raged unchecked. Sarah had clung to hope, calling it growing pains, but Mark's silence screamed worry. When Lily collapsed one day, her backpack slipping from her hands, they raced to the ER. The diagnosis hit hard. Leukemia. The doctor's gentle words couldn't soften the blow. Treatments, costs, survival odds. Insurance was a joke, covering scraps while bills soared. Chemo stole her hair and strength, but not her fire. She'd sketch sons in the hospital, whispering, "I'll be okay," while Sarah held her hand, and Mark worked late, his face etched with exhaustion. One night, as Sarah sorted bills by lamplight, Lily looked up from her sketch pad. "What if I sold lemonade? People like it. Maybe they'd help." Sarah's throat tightened, her daughter's innocence a knife to her heart. "That's beautiful, honey," she said, pulling her close. "Let's do it." The stand was born from that moment, Lily's way of saying she wouldn't just survive, she'd fight back. She poured her soul into it, believing one cup could shift the tide. Little did she know, the tide was already turning. Down the street, a man in a black jacket was walking her way, his quiet steps carrying a promise she couldn't yet see, one that would pour light into her darkest days and prove that even the smallest stand could hold up the world. Lily Harper's lemonade stand wasn't just a table and a pitcher. It was a lifeline, fragile but fierce, tethering her to a world that had started slipping away. A year ago, she'd been a different girl, 14 and fearless, pedaling her bike through Pasadena's winding streets, her auburn hair streaming like a banner of youth. She'd sketch wild, colorful worlds in her notebook, her laughter a spark that lit up their cramped rental home. Then the shadows crept in. Exhaustion weighed her down, a fog she couldn't shake. Bruises bloomed on her arms, unearned and unexplained. Fevers spiked, burning through nights as Sarah pressed cool cloths to her forehead, whispering, "It's just a bug, baby." But it wasn't. When Lily crumpled one morning, her legs buckling under her backpack's weight, the truth roared into focus. The ER was a blur of antiseptic and dread. Sarah clutched Mark's hand as the doctor delivered the blow. Leukemia. The word hung heavy, a thief that had already stolen so much. Chemo started fast, needles, nausea, hair falling in clumps onto her pillow. Lily watched it go, her reflection a stranger's, but she'd grit her teeth and sketch anyway, suns and stars blooming under her trembling hands. "I'll be okay, Mom," she'd say, her voice a thread of steel through the pain. Sarah would nod, swallowing tears, while Mark slipped out to work, his shoulders bowed under the weight of their crumbling life. The Harpers were drowning, and not just in grief. Sarah's waitressing job vanished when Lily's appointments stacked up. Bosses don't wait for sick kids. Mark took double shifts, pumping gas by day, hauling deliveries by night, his hands roughened, his eyes hollow. Bills piled up, a mountain of numbers they couldn't climb. Insurance laughed in their faces, covering drops in a bucket while the real cost, tens of thousands, loomed like a guillotine. In Pasadena, wealth glittered blocks away, but here, in their sagging corner of town, hope was a luxury for others. Lily saw it all. The worry lines carving her parents' faces, the late-night fights over money they didn't have. She felt it too, in every ache, every treatment that left her weak but alive. She wouldn't let it win. That's why she sat there now, under the punishing sun, pouring lemonade with hands that shook but never stopped. She needed to help, to lift even a sliver of the burden. Her sign, Lemonade for Life, wasn't just a plea, it was a promise. She'd help, she'd fight, she'd make a difference. But the neighborhood's response was a mixed bag, a mirror to a society that often looked away. Some passed with tight smiles, eyes averted, as if her sickness was contagious. "Times are tough," a woman muttered, hurrying by with her purse clutched close. A man in a pressed shirt shook his head. "Kids shouldn't have to do this," he said, his pity sharp but empty, no dollar to back it up. Lily's chest tightened, not from hurt, but from the sting of truth. They were right, but it didn't change her reality. Then came the others, the ones who saw her. Mrs. Delgado's $5 was a quiet lifeline, her mija a balm to Lily's frayed edges. A boy from school, Jake, rolled up on his skateboard, flipping a quarter into the jar. "You're badass, Lily," he said, grinning, and she laughed for the first time in days. A young mom, stroller rattling, bought 2 cups and slipped an extra $1 in, her eyes soft with understanding. "For your family," she whispered. Mr. Ortiz, the mail carrier, stopped mid-route, his uniform damp with sweat. "Best lemonade around," he said, dropping a 10. "Don't quit, kid." Each coin, each bill was a thread of hope, stitching her resolve tighter. By noon, the jar held $27, not much, but enough to keep her going. She poured another cup, the tartness sharp on her tongue, and thought of her parents. Sarah's forced smiles, Mark's calloused hands. She'd help. She'd keep pouring. She'd fight. The sun climbed higher, and a small crowd gathered. Kids from her old soccer team, a nurse who'd heard whispers of her stand. They chattered, laughed, dropped coins that clinked like tiny victories. A girl named Mia, her braids swinging, handed over a crumpled 5. "You're the strongest person I know," she said, and Lily's eyes stung, not from the heat, but from something deeper. The jar grew heavier, the air lighter, and for a moment she felt it, momentum, a swell of something bigger than her pain. Then a shadow fell across the table. She looked up, squinting, as a man in a black jacket approached, his steps slow but sure. The crowd hushed, sensing a shift. Lily didn't know it yet, but this was the pivot, the moment her small stand would crack open the world's indifference and let hope flood in. She'd been pouring lemonade to save herself, but soon she'd see it could save so much more. Hey, if Lily's fight has you tearing up, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories of grit and grace coming your way tomorrow. The Pasadena afternoon simmered, the heat pressing down like a lid on Lily Harper's small world. She stood behind her lemonade stand, pouring another cup with hands that trembled from fatigue, but never faltered. The jar brimmed with crumpled bills and coins, a modest haul that whispered of her grit. Her sign, "Lemonade for Life," fluttered faintly, its sunburst and heart a defiant splash of color against the gray of her struggle. The crowd around her buzzed softly, kids from school, a nurse, Mr. Ortiz, each a spark of kindness in a day that had started with so little. Then, a shadow stretched across the table, long and deliberate, silencing the chatter. Lily looked up, squinting against the glare. A man stood there, tall and lean, his black leather jacket scuffed at the edges, his jeans faded like old denim prayers. Sunglasses hid his eyes, but a scruffy beard framed a face that carried a quiet weight, a story etched in lines and stillness. He wasn't a neighbor, not one of the usual faces that nodded or hurried past. He moved with purpose, drawn by her sign, and stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping the stand. The pitcher, the cups, the jar. A faint smile tugged at his mouth, barely there but warm. "Hi," Lily called, her voice slicing through the hush, bright despite the weariness tugging at her bones. "Lemonade's $1, want some?" The man stepped closer, crouching slightly to meet her at eye level. $1, he said, his voice low and gravelly like a river worn smooth by time. "Sounds like the deal of the century," he nodded at her sign. "Lemonade for Life. What's the story there?" Lily pointed to the words, her finger steadied despite the flutter in her chest. "It's for my chemo. I've got leukemia and it costs a ton. I'm helping my mom and dad so they don't have to carry it all." His smile faded, replaced by a flicker of something raw, empathy maybe, or a shadow of his own battles. He glanced at the jar, then back at her, his sunglasses slipping down just enough to reveal eyes that held a storm of kindness. "How much does it take?" he asked, softer now. Lily shrugged, her honesty disarming. "Thousands?" "Way more than this, but every bit keeps us going," he nodded, a slow tilt of his head, and reached into his jacket. The crowd leaned in, breath held as he pulled out not a wallet but a checkbook, its leather cover worn like his coat. He flipped it open, pen poised. "What's your name, kid?" "Lily?" she said, blinking up at him, curiosity sparking in her hazel eyes. "Lily?" he repeated, scribbling fast, his handwriting sharp and sure. "Let's make sure you've got a fighting chance." He tore the check free and handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. Lily unfolded it, her hands shaking as the number swam into focus. $75,000. Her breath snagged, a gasp escaping her lips. "75,000?" she whispered, her voice a thread of disbelief. Sarah bolted from her chair nearby, her lawn-stained sneakers slapping the pavement. "What? Oh my God," she choked, staring at the check, then the man, tears springing free. "Who are you? How do we even—" "You don't," he cut in, his tone gentle but firm. "She's the one doing the heavy lifting. I'm just here to lighten the load." The crowd erupted, gasps, cheers, a roar that rolled down the street like thunder on steroids. "Is that Keanu Reeves?" Mia whispered, her braids swinging as she craned her neck. Phones flashed, whispers turned to shouts, and the air crackled with awe. Lily tilted her head, squinting at him. Are you famous or something? Keanu chuckled, a deep rumble that broke the tension, and crouched again. A little. But you, Lily? You're the real deal. The crowd lost its mind, a tidal wave of wonder crashing over the stand. Mr. Ortiz slapped a 20 on the table, his grin wide. She's a warrior, let's match that. Jake tossed in a 5, shouting, For Lily! The nurse dug into her purse, pulling out a 10, then a check of her own. This kid's worth it, she said, voice thick. Bills and coins rained down, the jar overflowing, a flood of generosity sparked by one man's quiet act. Keanu stood back, his presence a lighthouse cutting through the fog of their despair. He wasn't just a celebrity, he was a symbol, a beacon proving that even in a world that let kids like Lily suffer for profit, one heart could tip the scales. Sarah grabbed Lily's shoulders, tears streaming. This changes everything, she sobbed. Lily clutched the check, her eyes locked on Keanu's. Thank you, she said, her voice small but fierce, a vow wrapped in gratitude. He tipped his head, a ghost of a smile on his lips. You're the one to thank, Lily. Keep pouring that hope. The crowd pressed closer, a living pulse of support, but Keanu's gift was more than money. It was a mirror, reflecting a society's failures and a girl's strength. Lily's stand, once a whisper, now thundered with possibility, and the man in the black jacket had just lit the fuse for something unstoppable. The air around Lily Harper's lemonade stand still buzzed with the electric aftermath of Keanu Reeves' gift, but the real storm was just beginning. By dusk, Pasadena's quiet street had turned into a whirlwind of whispers and camera flashes. Mia's shaky video of Keanu handing Lily the $75,000 check hit social media, and the hashtag #LemonadeForLife ignited like wildfire. Within hours, strangers shared screenshots of Lily's sign, her uneven lemonade for life scrawled above a heart and sunburst. While news vans rolled in, their lights cutting through the twilight, neighbors posted blurry pics of the man in the black jacket, his quiet smile a spark that lit up screens nationwide. Lily's story wasn't just local anymore. It was a shout heard across the country. Sarah and Mark stood dazed as the world crashed into their lives. Their mailbox overflowed with envelopes, checks, cards, a $5 bill from a kid in Ohio scrawled with, "You're my hero, Lily." A local hospital called offering to wipe out their remaining bills, a lifeline after years of sinking. A lemonade company shipped crates of supplies, their note simple, "Keep pouring hope." Donations poured in, a river of kindness washing away the mountain of debt that had loomed over them. Sarah cried into Mark's shoulder that night, her voice breaking. "She did it. Our girl did it." Mark nodded, his calloused hands trembling. For the first time in a year, they breathed. Really breathed. Relief. A sweet shock after so much bitter. But Lily's stand had cracked something open, and the ripples kept spreading. Kids in Texas set up lemonade stands sending cash to cancer charities. A viral photo of Lily, pale, grinning, her straw hat tilted. Melted hearts from coast to coast. News anchors called her the Lemonade Girl, her story a rebuke to a system that let families drown in medical costs. The crowd's generosity that day, Mr. Ortiz's 20, Jake's 5, the nurse's check, had been a match, and Keanu's gift the gasoline. Now, the blaze of goodwill was unstoppable. A testament to what one small voice could do against a roaring injustice. Lily felt it too, even as her body faltered. A week after Keanu's visit, a fever spiked, her latest tests grim. Chemo had hit hard, her strength slipping like sand through her fingers. She lay in a hospital bed, her sketchpad idle, her breath shallow. Sarah sat beside her, whispering, "You're enough, baby. You've done enough." But Lily shook her head, her voice faint but firm. "I'm not done. There's more kids like me out there." The irony stung. A sick girl dreaming of healing others, her own fight unfinished. Yet that setback lit a fire. She clutched a stack of letters from strangers, kids, parents, survivors, and saw a purpose bigger than her pain. From that bed, Lily whispered an idea to Sarah. A foundation. "Lemonade for life," she said, her eyes bright despite the shadows beneath them. "To help families like us, no one should have to choose between medicine and food." Sarah's throat tightened, but she nodded. With the extra donations, far beyond their needs, they launched it quietly. Lemonade for Life wasn't just a name, it was a vow. Hope heals, Lily believed, and she'd make it real. The foundation took root fast. Schools hosted stands, their signs echoing hers. Businesses matched funds, their checks a chorus of support. A mom in Florida wrote, "My son's alive because of you." Lily read every word, her heart swelling even as her body ached. She grew into it, her voice rising above her illness. "We can help," she'd say to Sarah, sketching plans between treatments. "We can fight this together. We can change things." The repetition anchored her, a drumbeat of resolve. Volunteers flocked, neighbors, strangers, even Mia with her braids and fierce grin. The foundation paid off bills for a dozen families in its first month, a dent in the vast unfairness of a world that priced survival too high. Lily wasn't just a victim anymore. She was an advocate, her stand a seed that sprouted into a forest of change. The irony deepened. A girl too weak to stand some days was lifting others up, her sickness a strange strength. One evening as Sarah sorted donations at home, Lily looked up from her latest sketch, a sun bursting over a sea of lemonade stands. "Do you think Keanu knows?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Sarah smiled, brushing her daughter's short curls. "I think he'd be proud, honey." The movement grew louder. Lemonade for Life trended again. Stories of kids selling cups for sick friends flooding in. Lily's transformation was complete, from a girl pouring lemonade to save herself to a force pouring hope into a broken system. She'd faced a setback, but it only sharpened her edge, turning her pain into power. Autumn settled over Pasadena like a soft exhale, the air cooler now, the sun gentler on Lily Harper's fragile frame. Months had passed since her lemonade stand sparked a movement, since Lemonade for Life bloomed from a whispered dream into a force that lifted families from the brink. The foundation hummed with life, schools pouring lemonade for hope, companies doubling donations, strangers sending letters that piled up in stacks of gratitude. Lily, now 15, had become a quiet legend, her name a whisper on lips across the country. But her body still bore the scars of battle. Chemo lingered, a thief that stole her strength, and that last setback, the fever, the grim tests, had left a shadow over her fight. Then, hope stirred, alive and restless. A doctor called one crisp October morning, his voice crackling with something rare, excitement. "Lily, there's a new treatment," he said. "Experimental, but promising. Your foundation's funds made it possible. We're testing it here." Sarah gripped the phone, tears welling, while Lily sat up on the couch, her sketchpad sliding to the floor. "Will it work?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We don't know," he admitted. "But you've defied odds before." The treatment started fast, infusions, scans, a blur of white coats and beeping machines. Lily endured it, sketching suns between doses, her hazel eyes fixed on a horizon she dared to imagine. Weeks later, the results came. Sarah and Mark sat rigid in the doctor's office, hands clasped as he slid a chart across the desk. "Her cancer cells, they're shrinking," he said, a grin breaking through his professional calm. "It's working. Against all odds, it's working." Sarah sobbed, a sound of joy and disbelief, while Mark pulled Lily into a hug, his rough hands gentle on her thin shoulders. Lily blinked, stunned, then smiled, a slow, radiant thing that lit her pale face. Her hair, sprouting in soft curls, framed a victory no one had seen coming. Hope wasn't just a word anymore, it was a living force, pulsing through her veins, a gift her own fight had given back to her. Pasadena buzzed with the news, but Lily stayed quiet, letting her foundation's work shout for her. By November, Lemonade for Life had helped dozens, paying bills, funding treatments, proving kindness could claw back what injustice stole. The community planned an event to celebrate. A small stage, a crowd of neighbors, volunteers, kids clutching cups of lemonade. Lily stood at the mic, her yellow dress brighter now against her strengthening frame. "Hi everyone," she said, her voice clear, steady. "I started this to help my family. You made it bigger. We can keep helping together." The applause rolled over her, a thunderous wave, and Sarah whispered from the sidelines, "You've done it, baby." At the crowd's edge, unnoticed by most, stood a man in a baseball cap and faded jacket. Keanu Reeves watched, hands in his pockets, a small smile tugging at his lips. He'd never left Lily's story. Quiet checks sent through friends, calls to push her foundation's reach, his support a steady thread woven behind the scenes. As the event wound down, he stepped forward, catching her eye. "Hey, Lily," he said, his gravelly voice cutting through the chatter. She turned, startled, then grinned. "You came back!" He handed her a framed photo, their first meeting, her stand glowing under that summer sun. "Told you you're the real deal," he said. "Look at this. Hope heals because of you." Lily hugged him, tears spilling, her small arms fierce around his frame. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the photo. "For everything." Keanu tipped his cap, stepping back into the crowd, leaving her to shine. The day ended with laughter, lemonade, a community bound by her light, but the real ending was hers. A girl who'd poured her pain into a pitcher and watched it ripple out, defying a world that priced survival too high. Her recovery, her foundation, her quiet strength. It was a climax no one predicted, a peak of joy rising from the ashes of struggle. Life, Lily learned, was a bittersweet lemonade, tart with hardship, sweet with grace. She'd tasted both, and now she served it to others, a cup at a time. Keanu's kindness had lit the match, but her heart kept the flame alive, proving that even in the darkest corners, one small act could topple towers of inequity. As she stood there, curls catching the breeze, she knew it. The world wasn't fair, but it could be kind, and that was enough to keep pouring. Lily's story hits me hard, not just because it's beautiful, but because it forces us to ask, why does a kid have to sell lemonade to survive? I think it's a gut punch to a system that fails families like hers, proof that kindness can patch holes where justice falls short. Some might argue it's not enough, that real change needs laws, not lemonade. Fair point, but I see Lily's stand as a spark, a wake-up call that starts with us. 1 cup, $1, 1 heart. It adds up. What do you think? Is this hope enough, or just a bandage on a broken world? Drop your take in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for sticking with this journey. Your support keeps these stories alive. Subscribe, share, and let's keep the conversation going. More tales of grit await.